As always, I appreciate you joining me today, and I hope you are well. We're going to be thinking about the crossing of the Jordan River today, thinking about Joshua. Today's hymn is a hymn that I'm not familiar with. The hymn is called The Touch of His Hand, The Touch of His Hand on Mine.
There are days so dark that I seek in vain for the face of my friend divine. But though darkness hide, he is there to guide by the touch of his hand on mine. Oh, the touch of his hand on mine. Oh, the touch of his hand on mine. There is grace and power in the trying hour, in the touch of his hand on mine.
You might look at the other verses. There are times when tired of toilsome road, that for ways of the world I pine, but he draws me back to the upward track by the touch of his hand on mine. Look at the last verse. In the last sad hour, as I stand alone, where the powers of death combine, while the dark waves roll, he will guide my soul by the touch of his hand on mine. As we think about his grace and power. Look at our passage now in Joshua chapter 3 at verse 2. And we won't read the whole chapter, but it's just a wonderful chapter. But in chapter 3 at verse 2, after 3 days, the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. There's going to be a space between the people and the ark. They hadn't been this way before. They needed to be careful. So the priests are carrying it. People set out after them. They're going to sanctify themselves. They're commanded to. The Lord's speaking to Joshua, making sure they do all this. And as all of this was being commanded, and then as it happened, so it was when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground. In the midst of the Jordan, all Israel crossed over on dry ground, till all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. Chapter 4, verse 1, and it came to pass when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan that the Lord spoke. And I just love how it just matter-of-factly, all the people crossed over. And we appreciate that. Israel crossing Jordan River. Let's think about, again, our hymn, there are days so dark that I seek in vain. And we think about Joshua, because Joshua had seen dark days, hadn't he? It's Joshua who comes down with Moses from Sinai. It's Joshua who says, I think it's sound of battle. Moses says, no, sound of something else. Joshua and Caleb, who spy out Promised Land, and they try to encourage the people, but those 10 other spies gave a bad report. And you just can't imagine how frustrated Joshua and Caleb must have been. Here Joshua is. And he had seen dark times because of the bad report, and because the people disobeyed. Joshua is having to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. He had seen dark days. And there he was. Look back at our hymn again. There are times when tired of the toilsome road. 40 years he had been on that toilsome road. when it should have been a few days or weeks. But the Lord had been with him. And here, as he's crossing the Jordan, I was thinking about Joshua and Caleb too, because they're in the same situation. No one else had seen, or at least, it's like when you're a kid and you don't remember things from when you were a kid. And I'm thinking about the fact that Joshua and Caleb, they had crossed the sea, but they had crossed over a body of water before. They'd crossed over the Red Sea. Do you think Joshua thought that, when they got to the Jordan River, I think they thought, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? The Jordan River is not as wide as the Red Sea. I don't believe. Was it any harder for the Lord to cut off the waters of the Jordan than it was to part the waters of the Red Sea? And I was just thinking about how marvel it is that Joshua is seeing. He's seeing a miracle repeated. The waters stopped. And with that thought, it occurs to me, there's an example of that in the Gospels. A miracle repeated. And it's the catch of fish. And how wonderful it is after the Lord's resurrection when they don't realize it's the Lord, and all of a sudden they have more fish than they know what to do with. And Peter says, it's the Lord. And it's a repeated miracle. Touch of his hand on mine. Here Joshua is. It's happening again. The waters we're walking across once again on dry ground. We're crossing the Jordan. And as we think about these things being a shadow, and we think about crossing our own Jordan, and we think about getting to the true promised land, we think about the touch of the Lord's hand on us. I was reading recently in Philippians where Paul talks about that he may lay hold of what the Lord had laid. Let me go find it. Pardon this slight tangent. See if I can find it. I don't think it's chapter 2. I believe it's chapter 3. In chapter 3, it's verse 12, pardon me, where he says, not that I have already attained or am already perfected, but I press on, that I may lay hold of that for which Christ Jesus has also laid hold of me. And we feel the touch of the Lord's hand on us. Even in that last sad hour, where the powers of death combine, the dark waves roll. Even that hour. By faith, we go through that hour just as assuredly as Joshua walked across on dry ground with everybody. Because of the Lord's grace and power. Appreciate you. You have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.